In the bustling heart of New York City, where skyscrapers pierce the clouds and fortunes are made or lost in the blink of an eye, lived Alexander Voss, a billionaire whose empire spanned tech innovations and real estate moguls. But beneath his polished suits and private jets lay a man haunted by tragedy. His only son, Ethan, paralyzed from the waist down after a devastating car accident 5 years ago. Ethan's once vibrant life had been reduced to wheelchair-bound days in their opulent penthouse, his spirit dimmed by isolation and pain. Alexander poured millions into treatments, therapies, and the best specialists money could buy, yet nothing could mend the invisible fractures in their family. One crisp autumn afternoon, as Alexander's chauffeur navigated the crowded streets of Manhattan, fate intervened in the most unexpected way. Stuck in traffic near Central Park, Alexander glanced out the tinted window of his limousine and froze. There, on a weathered bench under a canopy of golden leaves, sat a young homeless girl, no older than 20, with matted hair and tattered clothes, her eyes bright with an unyielding kindness. She was gently pushing Ethan's wheelchair, which had somehow veered off the path during a rare outing supervised by a nurse who had stepped away momentarily. Ethan, usually withdrawn and bitter, was laughing, actually laughing, as the girl animatedly described a squirrel scampering nearby, her voice cutting through the city noise like a melody. Alexander's heart skipped a beat. Who was this stranger, this beacon of compassion amidst the indifferent crowd? He watched as she steadied the chair over a bumpy curb, her thin arms straining, but her smile never fading. When the nurse returned, flustered and apologetic, the girl simply waved it off, handing Ethan a crumpled flower she'd picked from the grass before disappearing into the throng of pedestrians. Ethan turned to the window, his face alive with a spark Alexander hadn't seen since before the accident. "Dad," Ethan said later that evening, his voice trembling with rare excitement. "She didn't pity me. She just saw me." Intrigued and moved beyond words, Alexander couldn't shake the image from his mind. That night, in his sprawling study lined with priceless art, he made a decision that would upend everything. He hired a team of private investigators to find her, discreetly, of course. Days turned into a week, and finally, they tracked her down. Her name was Lila, a runaway from a broken home in the Midwest, surviving on the streets by busking with a battered guitar and odd acts of kindness that kept her soul intact. She had no idea who Ethan was, let alone his father. But Alexander wasn't content with just knowing her story. He wanted to repay her in a way that would change lives forever. The next morning, he set his plan in motion, starting with an anonymous donation to the shelter where Lila sometimes sought refuge. Then he arranged for her to accidentally find a scholarship opportunity for a music program at Juilliard, tailored perfectly to her hidden talent, which his investigators had uncovered from street performances captured on grainy videos. Yet, that was only the beginning. Alexander, ever the strategist, decided to invite her to a gala he was hosting, under the guise of recognizing unsung heroes in the city. As the evening of the gala approached, Lila arrived in a borrowed dress, wide-eyed at the glittering ballroom filled with celebrities and tycoons. She had no clue why she'd been invited, but when Alexander approached her with Ethan by his side, the pieces began to fall into place. "You gave my son something no amount of money could buy," Alexander said, his voice steady but his eyes betraying deep emotion. "Hope." Lila blushed, stammering that it was nothing, just human decency. But Alexander pressed on, revealing his grand gesture. He was funding a foundation in her name, dedicated to helping homeless youth pursue arts and education, with Lila as its first director. The room erupted in applause, but that wasn't the shock everyone talked about. What truly stunned the world was what happened next. Alexander, in a move that defied his ruthless business reputation, announced he was stepping down from his CEO position to personally mentor Lila and expand the foundation globally. Whispers rippled to the crowd. Had the ice-cold billionaire finally thawed? But as Lila and Ethan shared a quiet moment on the balcony, overlooking the city lights, Alexander watched from afar, realizing this was more than charity. It was redemption. Little did they know, this alliance would unearth secrets from Lila's past that threatened to unravel everything, including a hidden connection to the accident that paralyzed Ethan years ago. As the night wore on, tension simmered beneath the surface. Lila confided in Ethan about her own hardships, fleeing an abusive family, scraping by on dreams of music that kept her alive. Ethan, inspired, opened up about his frustrations, the walls he'd built to shield his vulnerability. Their bond deepened, but Alexander's investigators had missed one crucial detail: Lila's real last name, which tied her to a long-forgotten lawsuit against one of his companies. When the truth surfaced the next day in a leaked report, the media frenzy exploded. Accusations flew. Was Alexander's generosity a cover-up? Or was Lila playing a longer game? Amid the chaos, Alexander confronted Lila in his office, the city skyline storming behind them. "Tell me it's not true," he demanded, his voice cracking for the first time in decades. Lila, tears streaming, explained how her father had been a whistleblower fired by Voss Industries, driving her family to ruin and her to the streets. But she swore she hadn't known about Ethan. It was pure coincidence. Alexander paced, his world tilting. Instead of anger, a profound guilt washed over him. "Then let's make it right," he said finally, extending his hand. Together, they decided to expose the corruption in his own empire, risking billions to bring justice. The fallout was immediate. Stock prices plummeted, board members resigned, and rivals circled like vultures. Yet, in the eye of the storm, something beautiful emerged. Ethan, empowered by Lila's resilience, began physical therapy with renewed vigor, pushing boundaries he'd long abandoned. Lila's foundation flourished, drawing donations from unexpected allies touched by the story. Alexander, stripped of his armor, found purpose beyond wealth, mentoring not just Lila, but countless others like her. But the shocks weren't over. One evening, as they gathered for a strategy meeting, a mysterious envelope arrived at the penthouse. Inside was a photograph of Lila as a child, standing beside a man who looked eerily like Alexander's late business partner, the very one involved in the accident that changed everything. Whispers of conspiracy grew louder. Was this a setup, or the key to healing wounds deeper than they imagined? As investigations deepened, they uncovered a web of deceit spanning years, involving corporate espionage and hidden alliances. Lila's guitar, once a street companion, now echoed in recording studios as she composed anthems for the forgotten. Ethan, with Lila's encouragement, designed adaptive tech for the disabled, turning his pain into innovation. Alexander, humbled, testified before Congress on corporate reform, his testimony broadcast live to millions. Yet, just when alliances solidified, a betrayal struck from within. One of Alexander's trusted advisors, jealous of the shifting power, leaked fabricated evidence suggesting Lila had orchestrated the entire encounter with Ethan for revenge. The public turned, headlines screaming, "Homeless hero or master manipulator?" Lila's world crumbled again, forcing her to vanish into the night, leaving Ethan heartbroken and Alexander furious. Desperate, Alexander mobilized his resources to find her, racing against time as the advisor's scheme unraveled further, revealing ties to international syndicates threatened by the Foundation's work. Ethan, refusing to stay sidelined, hacked into security footage using skills honed in isolation, spotting Lila at a remote train station. They set off on a cross-country pursuit, the billionaire and his son shedding luxuries for a raw quest that tested their bond like never before. Miles blurred into revelations, Alexander admitting his role in past cover-ups, Ethan forgiving long-held resentments, and hints of Lila's whereabouts leading them to a small town where she was hiding, volunteering at a community center. When they reunited under a starry sky, words failed, replaced by embraces that spoke volumes. But as they planned their return, a shadowy figure watched from the shadows, hinting at dangers yet to come. The figure emerged from the tree-line, a tall man in a dark overcoat, his face partially obscured by a scarf against the biting winter chill. Alexander tensed, instinctively stepping in front of Ethan and Lila, his hand reaching for the phone in his pocket. The stranger raised both palms in a gesture of peace, his breath clouding in the frigid air. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said, his voice low and gravelly, carrying a faint trace of an Eastern European accent. "My name is Victor Dragomir. I knew your late partner, Mr. Voss, and I know things about the accident that no one else does." Lila's eyes widened, her grip tightening on Ethan's wheelchair handle. Ethan leaned forward, his voice sharp. What kind of things? Victor glanced around the empty parking lot of the community center, the only light coming from a flickering street lamp and the distant glow of the town's holiday decorations. Not here. Too exposed. There's a diner 2 miles down the road. Meet me there in 20 minutes. Come alone if you want, but I think all 3 of you need to hear this. He turned and vanished into shadows as quickly as he'd appeared, leaving a business card fluttering to the frost-dusted ground. Alexander picked it up. Plain white stock, no logo, just a phone number and the name Victor Dragomir. The diner was a relic from another era. Chrome stools at a Formica counter, the smell of burnt coffee and greasy bacon hanging heavy in the air. A handful of late-night truckers nursed mugs and booths, paying no attention as a trio slid into the cornermost corner booth. Victor was already there, a half-eaten slice of pie in front of him, steam curling from a fresh coffee. He wasted no time. 5 years ago, the night of Ethan's accident, your partner, Marcus Hale, was driving the car that forced your son off the bridge. It wasn't random road rage. It was deliberate. Alexander's face drained of color. Marcus died in a plane crash 6 months later. Everyone said it was mechanical failure. Victor gave a bitter smile. Convenient, wasn't it? Marcus was skimming funds from a black-budget project at Voss Industries, advanced neural implants meant for military contracts. When he realized you were about to discover the missing millions during an internal audit, he panicked. Eliminating Ethan would have broken you, distracted you, maybe even driven you to step away from the company entirely. But Ethan survived and Marcus's nerves frayed. Someone higher up decided he was a liability. Lila's voice was barely a whisper. Who, someone higher up? Victor leaned in. A consortium. Defense contractors, intelligence operatives, venture capitalists who wanted the neural tech for themselves. They've been watching your foundation, Lila. The work you're doing, adaptive tech for the disabled, open source designs, threatens their monopoly. They orchestrated the leak about your father, the fabricated evidence against you, all to fracture your alliance before you could expose them. Ethan's fist clenched. And the photograph? The one of Lila as a kid with Marcus. That wasn't coincidence, Victor said. Marcus had an affair years ago, before he partnered with your father. Lila's mother was a lab assistant on the early neural trials. When she got pregnant, Marcus paid her to disappear, threatened her if she ever spoke up. Your father's whistleblowing wasn't just about unsafe working conditions. It was about discovering Marcus's embezzlement and the cover-up of those trials. Marcus ruined him to keep him quiet. Lila felt the world tilt. All these years on the streets, the gnawing sense of abandonment, the rage she'd buried under kindness, it all traced back to this table, these revelations. She looked at Alexander, then Ethan, her voice trembling but steady. So I'm his daughter? Biologically, yes, Victor confirmed. But he abandoned you before you were born. The photograph was sent to me by an insider who's ready to turn. They want immunity in exchange for testimony and the full ledger of transactions. Alexander rubbed his temples, the weight of decades pressing down. Why come to us now? Because the consortium is closing in. They know you're rebuilding trust, that the foundation is gaining traction. There's a kill order out, not on all of you, but on Lila. Make her the villain permanently, or eliminate her if the narrative fails. I was hired to monitor you, but Victor's eyes softened as they landed on Ethan's determined face, Lila's quiet strength. I have a son, too. Paralyzed. In Prague. Your designs. Ethan, the open-source exoskeleton blueprints you posted last month. They gave him his first steps in years. I can't let them silence you. Silence stretched across the booth, broken only by the clink of silverware from the counter. Finally, Alexander spoke. What do you need from us? Safe passage for the insider. They're in Montreal, ready to cross the border with a hard drive that contains everything. Bank records, emails, video of Marcus admitting the sabotage hours before the crash. In return, I'll get you to a secure location where we can broadcast the evidence live, uncut, before they can spin it. Ethan's mind raced. We can't just run. The foundation has momentum. Thousands of kids depending on the programs. If we disappear, they win. Lila placed a hand on his arm. Then we don't disappear. We fight smarter. We turned their timeline against them. Over the next hour, they sketched a plan on napkins, routes, contingencies, allies they could trust. Victor would arrange extraction for the insider. Alexander would liquidate just enough assets to fund an independent broadcast platform, free from corporate interference. Ethan would finalize the neural interface upgrades he'd been prototyping in secret, ones that could restore voluntary movement for thousands like him, and prove the consortium's tech was built on stolen, dangerous foundations. Lila's role crystallized as they talked. She would go public first, not as a victim, but as the daughter Marcus tried to erase, the survivor who turned pain into purpose. Her music, her story, would be the emotional anchor that made the evidence undeniable. They left the diner just before dawn, the sky bruising purple over snow-dusted fields. Victor drove off in a nondescript sedan, promising contact within 48 hours. Alexander booked 3 seats on a private charter to a remote lodge in Vermont, a property he'd kept off the books for emergencies exactly like this. The flight was tense, conversation sparse. Lila stared out the window, processing the seismic shift in her identity. Ethan worked furiously on his laptop, encrypting files, uploading decoys to throw off trackers. Alexander made calls in hushed tones, rallying old contacts who still owed him favors. At the lodge, nestled deep in pine forest with no cell service, they finally exhaled. A fire crackled in the stone hearth as they spread documents across a massive oak table. The insider, Dr. Elena Reyes, former head of neural ethics at Voss Industries, arrived that night, escorted by Victor. She was frail, haunted, carrying a reinforced case containing the drive. As they plugged it into a hardened laptop, years of corruption unfolded in cold digital clarity. Audio of Marcus confessing over whiskey, ledger entries siphoning billions, emails coordinating the accident, even medical records showing experimental implants tested on unwilling subjects whose families were paid off or intimidated, just like Lila's mother. But the deepest cut was a video file dated the day Marcus died. In it, he ran into an unseen handler, threatening to go public unless they protected him. The handler's voice was distorted, but one phrase stood out: clean slate protocol initiated. Hours later, Marcus's plane went down. Dr. Reyes wiped tears. I stayed silent too long. I thought if I just kept working, I could fix it from inside. But they never intended to help people, only control them. Lila embraced her, 2 women bound by the same betrayal. We fix it now. Together. Days blurred into preparation. Ethan and Dr. Reyes refined the exposé, weaving technical proof with human stories. Lila recorded a song, raw, acoustic, her voice cracking on lines about fathers who never came home, about finding family in strangers. Alexander coordinated with investigative journalists who'd been circling the story, promising them exclusive access once everything was ready. Yet danger circled closer. Drones buzzed a trillion one night, too sophisticated for hobbyists. Footprints appeared in the snow near the perimeter. Victor intercepted a hit team on the access road, barely escaping with a grazed shoulder. They accelerated the timeline. The broadcast would go live on New Year's Eve, piggybacking on global streaming platforms during peak viewership. Lila's performance would open, drawing millions, before transitioning to the evidence drop. As the date approached, bonds deepened in the isolation. Late nights by the fire, Ethan and Lila shared dreams they'd never voice aloud. He walking unaided across a stage to accept an award for his designs. She filling concert halls with music that healed. Alexander watched them, a quiet ache in his chest. He'd spent years protecting Ethan by controlling everything, only to realize freedom was the greatest protection. On December 30th, Victor received a final message from an unknown source. The consortium had mobilized private security, inbound within hours. Evacuation was no longer viable. They would have to defend the lodge long enough to upload the files. Alexander revealed a hidden cache, biometric safes holding defensive gear he'd hoped never to use. Ethan adapted his prototypes into non-lethal countermeasures. EMP pulses, drone jammers, automated turrets using his adaptive code. As snow began to fall in thick sheets, blanketing the world in silence, they took positions. Lila clutched her guitar like a talisman, humming softly to steady her nerves. Ethan monitored feeds from perimeter cameras, his fingers flying across keys. Alexander stood at the window, watching headlights pierce the storm in the distance. The first vehicles crested the ridge just after midnight, black SUVs sliding on ice. Gunfire shattered the quiet, muzzle flashes blooming like deadly fireworks. But the lodge held, reinforced doors, smart defenses triggering in sequence. Inside, the upload bar crept forward. 47%, 62%, 89%. A breach at the rear sent Victor sprinting down the hall, returning fire. Dr. Reyes' patches wound, while Lila dragged barricades into place. Ethan rerouted power to boost signal strength, sweat beating despite the cold. Then silence. The attackers retreated, realizing the upload was nearly complete. At 99%, the screen flashed green. Live feeds across the world lit up with Lila's face, her guitar, her voice rising in defiant melody as the evidence streamed behind her. Millions watched. Servers mirrored the files faster than they could be taken down. Hashtags exploded. Governments issued statements. Markets trembled. But in the lodge, exhaustion crashed over them like a wave. Victor slumped against the wall, blood seeping through bandages. Ethan's hands shook as adrenaline ebbed. Lila's final cord hung in the air, tears freezing on her cheeks. Alexander knelt beside his son, pulling him into an embrace that needed no words. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. Federal agents, tipped off anonymously, converging to secure the site. As dawn broke over the mountains, painting the snow gold, they stepped onto the porch together. The world had shifted irrevocably overnight. Arrest warrants were already issuing for consortium leaders. The Foundation's accounts swelled with donations from ordinary people moved by the broadcast. Yet new shadows loomed. A final file, hidden in the drive's metadata, auto-decrypted as they watched. Coordinates to an offshore facility where the neural tech was being weaponized in real time, implanted in operatives without consent. Dr. Reyes whispered, "That's only the beginning. There are others, dozens, still trapped there." Lila met Alexander's eyes, then Ethan's. Resolve hardened in all three gazes. "We're not done," she said quietly. Alexander nodded. "Then we go get them." Ethan powered up his laptop again, already mapping routes, allies, resources. Victor, wincing but determined, began cleaning his weapon. The storm had passed, leaving the air crisp and electric with possibility. Somewhere out there, across oceans and borders, the next battle waited, and they were ready to meet it together, unbreakable. As the private jet sliced through the clouds toward the coordinates in the South Pacific, Alexander gazed out at the endless ocean below, a mirror of the turmoil within. The offshore facility, a floating fortress disguised as an oil rig, loomed in satellite imagery like a mechanical beast, its decks bristling with armed guards and hidden labs where the consortium's neural implants turned humans into unwitting puppets. Lila sat across from him, her fingers tracing the strings of her guitar, composing a silent requiem for the battles ahead. Ethan, strapped into his customized seat, interfaced with a holographic display, his prototypes humming as he fine-tuned drones for reconnaissance. Victor, bandaged but unyielding, checked weapons with Dr. Reyes. Their unlikely team forged in fire. "We hit them at dawn," Alexander declared, his voice cutting through the engine's roar. Silent insertion. Extract the victims, upload the final evidence from inside their servers, then burn it all down digitally and literally. No one argued. The stakes were too high. These weren't just strangers trapped in cold cells. They were echoes of Ethan's paralysis, Lila's abandonment, Alexander's regrets. Each life saved would be a strike against the shadows that had haunted them. The approach was flawless, a testament to Alexander's resources and Ethan's ingenuity. Under cover of a manufactured storm, courtesy of hacked weather satellites, they rappelled from a stealth chopper onto the rig's periphery. Alarms blared almost immediately, but Ethan's EMP burst silenced them, plunging sections into darkness. Guards swarmed like ants, but Victor's precision fire and Lila's improvised distractions, flares mimicking incoming missiles, bought precious time. Deep in the bowels of the facility, they found the horror. Rows of chambers where subjects lay in induced comas, neural implants glowing under translucent skin, wired to control grids that fed data to distant overlords. Dr. Reyes gasped, recognizing faces from her old team. Colleagues she thought retired, now enslaved to the very tech they created. "We have to disconnect them carefully," she urged, her hand shaking as she initiated overrides. But the consortium had anticipated intruders. A lockdown sealed the labs, and from hidden speakers boomed the voice of the handler from Marcus's video. Cold, mechanical, unmasked as AI augmented. "You think you've won, Voss? This is evolution. Join us or perish." Trapdoors hissed open, releasing enhanced operatives. Humans with implants granting superhuman speed, their eyes vacant yet deadly. Chaos erupted. Alexander fought hand-to-hand, his billionaire poise giving way to raw fury, disarming one assailant with improvised taser from Ethan's kit. Lila, no stranger to street survival, wielded a wrench like a baton, her movements fluid as a dancer's, protecting Dr. Reyes as she freed the first victims. Victor held the corridor, a one-man barricade, but a glancing bullet felled him, blood pooling on the grated floor. Ethan, from a commandeered console, hacked the core system. "I'm in," he shouted, fingers blurring. But an operative lunged, shattering his wheelchair in a brutal tackle. Pain exploded in Ethan's legs, or what he could feel them, but rage fueled him. Grabbing a loose cable, he channeled a surge through the attacker's implant, short-circuiting it in a shower of sparks. "Not today," he growled, dragging himself to the keyboard. As the battle raged, Lila reached Victor, pressing a cloth to his wound. "Stay with us," she whispered, her voice breaking. He gripped her hand. "Tell my son, he's walking because of you all." With his last breath, he handed her a detonator. "Finish it." The extractions intensified. One by one, the victims stirred, confused, grateful, their stories spilling out. Kidnapped whistleblowers, test subjects from forgotten corners of the world. Alexander carried a young woman over his shoulder, her implant deactivated, whispering assurances he'd failed to give his own family for so long. But the handler's forces closed in. Cornered in the central hub, the team faced a phalanx of operatives. Ethan uploaded the final cache, live feeds of the atrocities beaming to global networks, irrefutable proof that would topple empires. "It's done," he announced, the world already reacting. Stock markets crashing, arrests flashing on intercepted news feeds. In a final gambit, Lila activated Victor's detonator, rigging the rig's power core for overload. Explosions rocked the structure, flames licking the waves. They fought to the helipad, dragging the rescue to board the chopper as the facility buckled. An operative grabbed Lila's ankle, pulling her back, but Ethan, summoning strength from his prototypes, fired a neural disruptor, freeing her. As they lifted off, the rig erupted in a colossal fireball, a pyre for consortium sins, lighting the dawn sky like a second sun. Below, rescue boats, summoned by Alexander's allies, plucked survivors from the debris, but the true victory was in the airwaves. Billions watched the exposé, Lila's song overlaying the footage, her lyrics a call to arms. "From shadows we rise, unbroken, alive." Back on solid ground, in a secure compound overlooking the Pacific, the world transformed. Governments fell, corporations dissolved, and the Foundation, now renamed Voss-Reyes Alliance, became a global beacon. Lila, revealed as Marcus's daughter but claiming her own legacy, led with grace, her music tours raising millions while advocating for ethical tech. Ethan, with Dr. Reyes' help, perfected his interfaces. He took his first unassisted steps on a sunlit beach, Lila's hand in his, their love blooming from shared scars into something profound. Alexander, no longer the isolated tycoon, testified in international courts, dismantling the remnants of the consortium. He found peace and mentorship, guiding the rescued toward new lives, his empire repurposed for good. Victor's son arrived one day, walking tall with Ethan's tech, a living tribute that brought tears to all. Years later, under a canopy of stars much like that small-town reunion, the trio, now a family, gathered on a hilltop. Ethan proposed to Lila with a ring forged from salvaged implant metal, symbolizing redemption. Alexander, graying but vibrant, raised a toast. "We didn't just survive, we ignited change." For every life touched, every chain broken. The story spread like wildfire, books, films, anthems, inspiring generations. Homeless youth found scholarships, the paralyzed walked again, and corporate greed trembled at the power of compassion. In quiet moments, Lila strummed her guitar, Ethan designed futures, and Alexander reflected on that fateful park bench where a simple act of kindness unraveled destinies. And so, in a world forever altered, their legacy endured. Proof that from the ashes of betrayal rises unbreakable hope, a symphony of resilience that echoes eternally, drawing listeners and viewers into its spell, urging them to believe that one spark of humanity can illuminate the darkest voids. As the credits roll in imaginations worldwide, the message lingers. Change begins with seeing each other, truly, and acting without fear. What started with a billionaire, a homeless girl, and a paralyzed son ended as a revolution of the heart, magnificent in its scope, eternal in its impact.